Thank you for joining us on the Photo Flunky Show, episode number 55. Today we're going to be talking about purchase decisions and how to buy the best DSLR for your photography. Hey, we appreciate you being here. My name is William Beem.
Hi, my name is Lee Beem.
And today we're going to be talking about how to buy the best DSLR for you. And this topic kind of came up because people are asking questions, what's the best DSLR? And there really is no one best DSLR. That's why they make so many different types and styles and brands of them, is because it depends upon what you need to do. So we're going to kind of be going over some of the things that your motivation and your requirement, and those words sound really boring, but we'll try to liven it up a little bit as we're going through it.
Yes.
And before we get through that, let me tell you that show notes are going to be available at williambeem.com/episode 55. And of course, you get a free transcript of the show there. You can subscribe to the show, get it delivered to you fresh and new every time it comes out. Just go to photoflunky.com, and on the player there, you'll find links to subscribe on iTunes and Google Play and others. Finally, we would invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest. Just go to williambeem.com and you'll find links up in the header that'll get you connected to us on social media. So let's get down to it. What is the best DSLR for you? I'm presuming that everybody knows what I mean by DSLR. It stands for digital single lens reflex. And when you're shopping, that's the only time you'll need to know what that means.
Yes.
Basically, we're talking about a camera with interchangeable lenses and a mirror inside. So this is not going to be covering micro four thirds. It's not going to be covering mirrorless. These are single lens reflex cameras that are just happen to be digital, which is most of what's on the market available.
Pretty much, yes.
I think for people that are, either visiting our website or listen to the podcast. So let's start off with, what's your motivation? Do you want or need to get a new DSLR?
See, to me, want for something like that is almost a bigger motivating factor than need. Unless you're going into something professional, nobody really needs a DSLR, but I think it's more than acceptable to have something just because you want it.
Wait a minute, you think outside of a professional photographer, nobody needs a DSLR?
I don't think you need one. You're trying to justify it by need. I suppose it depends how far you take it. But I mean, do you really need one?
I think it depends on what you want to do with it, whether you're a professional or not. So when I say need is, do you have a camera now? So let's go to the kind of one of the steps we were talking about. Are you upgrading or starting fresh? If you're starting fresh, it's probably because you want one.
Yeah.
There are capabilities that you just don't have if you're shooting with an iPhone or a point and shoot.
I'm sorry. That's where I was coming in. I thought you were leading in from the start.
Well,
what
was the start?
Well, from starting off with no DSLR. Like, this is your first one.
Okay,
so that's why I was saying want.
See, we're confused with each other already.
Oh no.
Okay, so if you're starting fresh, getting into a DSLR, and it's not for a professional purpose, then I would say most likely it's a want, but not always. The reason that I got back into photography, and here I have to go with my old story again. When I was in high school, I wanted to be a professional photographer. I was all set to go to a professional photography school, either Brooks out in California, or it's now Daytona State College. It was Daytona Beach Community College at the time. Both of those were kind of like the top photography schools in the country. And since I live in Orlando, Daytona Beach Community College was looking really strong. And I got sidetracked into, personal computers and led to a whole IT career. But when I got back into photography, it was because I had problems with point and shoots. I went on a cruise in Alaska and I brought my old film SLR cameras with me. And I thought I had everything right. And I didn't pay close enough attention because I brought the bodies from one brand and the lenses from another. So I couldn't do a thing with those film cameras. So all I had was a little Nikon E775, I think it was, the model was. And this is probably one of the crappiest point and shoot cameras that was ever developed. There was a phrase called shutter lag that I wasn't familiar with at the time. But here's what happened. I was on the boat in Alaska. A whale would come up and breach. I'd push the shutter, trying to get that little moment, and the camera would stop and think for 2 or 3 seconds. And then the whale would go back underwater and there'd be nothing but bubbles and a couple of ring waves. And then the click came through, right? And not only that, but the photos were crappy. I mean, they were grainy. I thought, okay, I need something better than this if I want to get back into photography. It wasn't professional at the time.
Okay.
To me, in my mind, that was a need. If I want to take nice photos, I need a better camera.
I understand that, yes.
But I also see what you're saying. It's like, it's really a want because you're not at that time trying to make money out of it.
Well, but that was really where I was coming from.
But I guess what we're saying is kind of be honest with yourself. Are you buying a camera because you need it, maybe for requirements or a job or something like that? Or you just want one?
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking of want. It's like, I just want it. It looks nice. It looks pretty. It's got a live feed or something on the back. I want it. And that's okay. That's not a bad reason for buying a camera.
Oh, I think it's motivation for most of us for our first ones, at least.
It is a lot of fun it's like, I just want it.
Yes.
But what we're talking about, if you're trying to say, why do you want it? Why do you need it? Is to help you make sure that you buy one that's actually going to make you happy. If you're buying a camera because you think, oh, this is a bigger camera, this is a professional camera, and it's going to take nicer photos, you're probably going to find out that all these cameras will take really good photos on a bright sunshine day. But when you get into more challenging circumstances, some of them may not do as well as others.
Well, first week with my first DSLR were the worst photos I've ever taken in my life. At age 3, my daughter took better photos with a disposable camera than what I got out of that DSLR because I didn't know what the heck I was doing with it.
Yeah, so sometimes maybe what you need to take better photos, if that's your motivation, is really training rather than another piece of gear.
You know what's really annoying? When you pay money for something that's supposed to take good photos, and then you have to do stuff to make it work.
That's kind of like the photographer's favorite thing was when someone comes up and says, oh, it's a nice camera. It must take wonderful photos.
Yes.
And all you want to do is like mix up all the settings, put it down on the table, say, go ahead, try it.
Yes. But you don't even have to mix up the settings. I mean, if you don't shoot on auto, they're probably going to.
Yeah, it's not the camera. I mean, yes, the camera can help you, but you got to know what you're doing. And so that's why I'm saying from your motivation, if you're not getting the photos that you want out of the camera, is it because the camera can't do something or you need to learn something? So before you go spend money, I guess my first piece of advice is determine your motivation. If you need education, sometimes that's money better spent than buying new gear.
And you might need a piece of equipment or an accessory that goes with the camera to help you.
So your requirements, do you have special photography needs? And when I talk about that, I'm thinking of people who shoot certain things like events or weddings. Mm-hmm. Wedding photographers, it's an event, obviously, but they can't necessarily go in there and be going clack, 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 and disrupting the wedding ceremony itself. And some of those churches don't have the best light.
That's also true.
And it's not just the church, it's the environment. Where are the people getting dressed? You want to get the preparation. You want to get all these events ahead of time. Later on, when the reception is going, the sun may be going down. You need a camera that works well in low light and high ISO. So those maybe get a little more expensive. If you're going to be a concert photographer, you're going to have a lot of light on the stage, but it's almost like a sports photography thing. You need to be able to shoot off frames very quickly because you're capturing action.
Yes.
And same thing if you're a news reporter. If you ever watched, the president when he goes up for a press conference, you hear those shutters just flashing along.
Yeah.
So depending on what your requirements are, that's going to help you inform what you need. So think about the type of photography you do. If you're doing long exposure, you can do that at a low ISO. You probably don't need to spend a whole lot of money on a camera.
That's also true. Get a tripod.
Yeah, tripods are your buddy. I'd spend more money on a tripod than a camera if I were doing that kind of work.
Well, that's why I very rarely upgraded, and I'm happy with the camera now. Given the choice, I would rather get a really nice lens instead of spend money on a new camera body because I'm happy with what I have. A lens will make more difference to specific types of photography than a new camera for me.
Exactly, and I think this is kind of where we go into, whether you're upgrading or starting fresh, you're buying into a system. If you buy Nikon, you're not going to be able to use Canon lenses without some kind of an adapter ring. And even then, you're going to lose some of the special capabilities that your camera has. You might be able to use the lens, but it's not going to give you the information transferring that little adapter ring. So you're buying extra stuff. You don't really want to have to do that. If you've already got a DSLR and those lenses will work on the camera that you're looking to move into, it kind of makes sense to stay with the brand that you've got.
It does.
But there are occasionally exceptions to that. You were talking about whether you would want to go full frame or not.
I did, and I decided not to without doing very much research into it. I kind of stopped short very early on in looking into it. And
I kind of ran into the same situation. I started off, my first DSLR was a Nikon D70, and that was kind of to get into it and start shooting digital. And it was a nice little camera. It was a good beginner starter camera. The reason I bought it is because it felt better. I went to a camera store and I picked up the Nikon. I picked up the Canon, and quite honestly, I bought it because the Nikon felt better in my hand than the Canon did.
I was exactly the same. I mean, when I went around, it was actually because my brother was looking at cameras and I was feeling the cameras. At the time, I wasn't looking for a DSLR myself. I was probably at least a year before I eventually did buy my own one, which kind of happened by accident. But I was walking around the store and I always remembered that I liked the feel of the Nikon. That the Canon looked just as nice to me as the Nikon did. But those are kind of your two most well-known brands. I just felt like the Canon didn't have as nice a feel for me. It wasn't as comfortable in my hand, and I think the bodies and lenses tend to be a little bit lighter, which is an appeal for some people, and it might be one of the draw factors for you if that's what you're looking for. But for me, I like something that feels a bit more solid. So
the weight can definitely be a big factor, because if you're going to be walking around carrying something, the cameras that I have now are heavy.
yes,
And after a while, I get tired of lugging them down. If you're going on a vacation and you just want to take some snapshots, even get some nice quality images, but you'd want more than a point and shoot or your phone. Lugging around, well, I've got a D800 with a battery pack on it. So the camera body itself is tall and heavy. And then by the time I add a lens onto it, I've got the 24-70, and I've got my 70-200. That's a lot of weight to carry around. I know you can get a 28-300 as a travel lens to go with that now, and that's probably a good choice if you're walking around. But you're still just lugging a lot of weight on that. Whereas if you got a more compact camera that was, maybe a crop sensor with the 18-200 millimeter lens on it, you're going to be much more comfortable traveling around or walking around the city or doing street photography or taking shots while you're on vacation.
Yes. I mean, I like my crop sensor camera. I've got the D7000. I'm happy enough with it. It's kind of solid enough for my liking that I can feel it's got some substance. I like to feel a bit of weight in my hand, but it's also not that heavy that it breaks my back walking around with a big lens on it.
Yeah, I've loved mine for, I want to take very serious shots, I guess. I went from the D70 and I realized it didn't have the capabilities I need. I moved up to the Nikon D200, which is still a crop sensor, but it was like a bigger body and I could put the grip on it, and it was kind of the same size as what I've got right now. It was really a good camera for settings and controls, but it didn't do very well at high ISO. And back in those days, the sensors just really weren't that good. I moved from that to the full frame D700, and I was in love with that. I sold all of my crop sensor stuff. And that was kind of goes back to one of the things you were talking about. It's like, can you afford the new lenses or other things to go with it if you change from a crop sensor to a full frame?
Yep.
You can put the crop sensor lenses on a full frame camera. They're going to feel a little different than what you're used to from shooting on the crop sensor. But I decided I don't want to do that. I want to go all the way in. And that's what I did. I sold everything that was crop sensor. Didn't look back. I gave up my favorite lens, which was that 10.5 millimeter fisheye.
Oh, I was
that
just
was
talking about that last night.
That is a really fun lens if you got a crop sensor. If you got a Nikon crop sensor, that 10.5 millimeter fisheye lens. And if you've got a Canon and you've got a little fisheye lens, you're probably having fun with that too. I really love that fisheye, and I've never gotten one again since, because the one for full frame is a 16 millimeter and it's more expensive, and I just never could really rationalize getting it.
A fisheye is so much fun, and that one's kind of nice because it doesn't have an enormous amount of distortion. Anyways, that's going a bit off topic.
It is going a little bit off topic, but it also kind of brings us back to something else that we were talking about for this episode: is can you afford to operate it? So if you're going to switch or even buy in fresh with something, can you afford the accessories and lenses that need to go with it?
Well, that make it so great, yeah.
I made the decision that that's what I was going to do. I started off selling all of my old gear in, I think it was a company called KEH.com. They went to one of the local camera stores and did a buy-in. So basically I went there, I stood in line with a bunch of other geeks, all my gear, sold it off to them. They gave me a fair price for it.
Okay.
It was much better than trying to put it on eBay or, doing online selling. With that, I'd already bought my D700, but with that, I could buy a couple of lenses. If you're getting another camera, it's like, are you going to sell everything you've got and then use that to buy into what you have? Do you already have the budget to go ahead and buy the lenses that are full frame if you're making that kind of move? Or vice versa. Right now, for some of these little travel things I'm talking about, I would love to have a lighter camera to walk around with. I'd probably get a crop sensor Nikon with a 18-200 millimeter lens and just leave it at that. Nice for walking around the streets, around parks, going on travel.
Yeah, like my little one.
Yeah, it works beautifully. All right, we also wanted to bring up something, and we kind of touched on this a little bit, but let's go back and call it out officially. Is it well supported by third parties?
Yeah, that's another thing. Like if you want to buy a third-party lens for it.
Yeah.
Okay, Tamron does them. Sakina does them.
Zeiss. There are a number of brands out there.
You've got a bunch of them out there. And can you get third-party lenses?
And Sigma. I'll be honest, for my Nikon cameras, I really do appreciate Nikon lenses. The autofocus is fast, it is silent, and it is accurate. And I want to keep that. I borrowed a friend's Sigma 24-70 one time, and the photos were fine. I had no problem with the optical quality of it. This is going back a few years. I don't know what the newest one's like, but it sounded like a coffee grinder when it was focusing.
Not the common.
And it was slow. That's not necessarily a bad thing, depending on what your circumstances is. If you're going out shooting wildlife and sinus little sound is going to throw them off, you may not want something that sounds like a coffee grinder.
True.
Or if you need to be in a quiet environment like a wedding.
That's also true. Yeah.
These are all circumstances that you got to think of as, it's not just the camera. You're buying into a system. You want to know, is the system well supported? All right, so Lee, let me ask you this. Have you tried third-party lenses with your camera?
I have, but only one. And I'm a little bit strange. When I buy something, I tend to use the official product. So I've got an iPhone. I've only bought Apple accessories that kind of plug into the working parts. And I'm the same with my camera. Having said that, I did get a Tokina wide-angle lens. I got the 11-16 millimeters and absolutely loved it. There was nothing wrong with this lens. It was not the right lens for me for the type of photography I do, and I did eventually sell it, but I had no issues with it whatsoever.
Tokina is a brand that I bought a wide-angle lens from them as well. Nikon, for the crop sensors, had a 12-24, and it was just out of reach for me at the time. Tokina had a 12-24. I bought that, and I thought this was fantastic. It had a nice, quiet autofocus. It was fast. The wide-angle range was great.
Yeah.
And in fact, that Tokina lens is what bailed me out remember I've told you this story before, when I was in San Francisco and I was cleaning my 18-200, a Nikon lens and the front element fell out. The quality control just really wasn't that good. So I spent all of my time in San Francisco shooting with that Tokina 12-24 lens. And it did great. It wasn't always the lens that I wanted. I remember spending on Baker Beach trying to shoot the Golden Gate Bridge, and it's way off in the distance with that wide angle lens. But I still got a shot that I thought was great. The lens performed wonderfully.
I loved the 11-16. You probably just as well. That was just as well that you had the 12-24. I think the 11-16 would have killed you, the ultra wide. I mean, it was fantastic, and I bought it for a purpose without the intention to keep it because it was cheaper than renting it. But I really fell in love with the lens for what it was, and I wanted it to work for me. I think trying to make a piece of gear work with what you're doing is the wrong way about it. You need to buy what works for what you're doing.
It is, and that kind of ties back to what we said, can you afford to operate it? And look at your budget. You're not just buying a camera, you're buying a system. If you already have lenses that will work with the camera, then you're kind of covered there.
Yeah.
The expansion would be a different decision. But if you're buying a camera to start, or if you're upgrading maybe from a crop sensor to a full frame, or downgrading, I guess some people may not consider downgrading, but if you're switching format factors from crop to a full frame or back and forth, the lenses you choose are probably going to be best if they fit the format that you want.
That helps a lot. And I mean maybe give or take, there might be one or two that you have to sell or trade off and get something new. But I think if you have to do a complete overhaul of your kit, that certainly would be a factor to me. If you can do it and it's what you want to do, fine. But these are things that you need to consider first.
So, and it again goes back to your purpose. We talked about the weight if you're going to be walking around carrying it.
Yes.
I'm much more happy with my big heavyweight camera when I'm doing portrait shoots or when it's sitting on a tripod rather than me lugging it all over the place.
Yeah, but you didn't buy it to lug around, really.
No, I really didn't. I lug it around because it's the camera that I've got.
Yeah.
And the way I do photography for travel usually is with it in a bag or a backpack, going to a specific spot and waiting to get my shot.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I'm trying to take it all over the place and do street photography. That's just, it's not really my thing. And I don't think it's the best camera for that.
Yeah, and see, I bought, well, that's not the reason I bought it, but I do love my camera and it's sort of portability, if you could put it that way, because I like to run around and move in and out and get photos on the fly. So it's kind of perfect for me with the crop sensor.
And even some of the other accessories that you might not think about, the kind of memory card it's going to use. Is it going to use an SD card or is it going to use a compact flash card? Some cameras will do both. But if you've got a card reader that, you only do SD cards, then suddenly you move up to something with a compact flash, then you've got another little piece of equipment that you've got to go off and purchase.
And if you need a battery grip, the prices vary enormously as you go up the ladder.
Oh, they really do. But, I think a battery grip is a wonderful thing to add to cameras that are going to be a little larger and bulkier, because when you're trying to do that portrait orientation, you don't want to be holding your arm at a strange angle to click the shutter speed. Mm-hmm. The nice thing with the battery grip, not only does it give you more battery power and a faster shutter speed, if you're going to be doing continuous mode, but there's also another shutter release button on the grip. So when you turn it portrait, it's right there in your right hand and the top finger, and you just go ahead and click it there.
Awkward.
It's not awkward. And there's a focus button back there, at least on my Nikon there is. It's a wonderful tool to add on if you're not buying something like the big flagship camera that's already got all that stuff built into it. So think about the accessories, think about the supplements, and make sure you've kind of gone through like your requirements. What do you want to shoot? What camera is going to be best for that? And finally, I'm going to say, don't buy more than you need.
Yeah.
I've seen people go off and buy big cameras like a Nikon D4 or D5. And yes, it does everything, but man, you spend a lot of money for that camera. And if you're not really going to be shooting up to all the capabilities that it has, I don't think it's really a good value.
Well, if you're spending money on features that are surplus to requirements, if you've got the money to spend and it makes you happy, I think go do it. But most of us have some kind of budget restraints, and we'd rather spend the excess on something that does something for us.
Going up from something like a Nikon D800 or now D810 up to the Nikon D5 is almost double in price. That's
phenomenal.
That's not something to sneeze at. Even if you've got the money, it's like you can buy a lot of other fun stuff for your camera. You can buy another lens for the price of getting that camera. If you're not going to use all the requirements or the features that it gives you, I don't know that it's really a good idea. I wouldn't recommend it that way. If you need it, if you're a sports photographer, if you're a photojournalist, you know what you need. And I know some people that buy that camera just because of the pride they get from having the top of the line.
Well, that's okay too. I really don't have an issue with that. I think if you've got to go show it off.
That goes back to I want it.
I'm okay with that. I'm not a things person. I tend not to buy anything more than I need. I check very carefully. I'm all for the person. If you can and you want it and it's important to you, I think you should go and do it and be proud of it.
Yep.
If you do it, show it off.
And one of the nice things that I think you can do for yourself is buy something that your friends or people that you know also have, at least in the system. Because if you want to ask somebody for help, it's good to know somebody who knows the Canon system, who knows the Nikon system. If you want to shoot Pentax, we were talking about your brother who shoots Pentax.
Well, no, he doesn't.
He doesn't anymore.
He started off, we were looking at, he had a Pentax and he had a Sony DSLR.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Sony, that used to be the old Minolta line.
Yes.
That's what I had for my film cameras.
But he loved it for the lenses because you could get really nice, extra lenses that were very inexpensive. It was a nice way for him to start. But he changed over to Nikon when I had Nikon. And this touches on what you were saying about getting what your friends have. The reason we did that is because when we bought kind of special purpose lenses that weren't going to be the everyday walkabout, between the two of us, we figured out who would buy what, and we just switched them because most of the time, we were never on vacation or off something the same time where we needed the same lens. It kind of worked. I mean, I bought the wide angle. He took it down and used it on vacation, brought it back to me with one of his telephoto lenses that I wanted to borrow. I took those two off. And it's great.
See, that worked for your family. And like I said, I borrowed a friend's Sigma lens one time. We were on a photo shoot and I didn't have that particular lens. So that worked out great for me. I had an old Nikon lens that was kind of giving me a problem. And then I had my 70-200, which I dearly love, but it wasn't right for the shot we were doing. We said, here, try this one out. And it's good to have someone who's familiar with the same, at least brand that you have, even if not exactly the same model, because sometimes you can help each other out that way. Sometimes it also makes it easy if you want to rent something that you don't have. Maybe you don't want to go off and purchase the lens, but if you can rent something that's well supported, that's another good option.
Well, we went out that night to the Contemporary Resort, Disney World, for the 4th of July, and we took our tripods and photos, and one of our friends there just happened to shoot with Nikon, and she offered me, she said, look, I've got a couple of lenses here. Do you have any of these? And I just took one of her lenses, like literally a minute or two before the fireworks started, and clicked it on. Oh, well, because we both had the same camera system. Exactly.
And that's a good way to try before you buy. Maybe you didn't even know you wanted it until you picked it up.
Yeah.
I've got friends, I'd go off and do portrait shoots and someone would come up with the Nikon 105. And it's a wonderful portrait lens. It's designed as a macro lens, but you know what? It makes beautiful portraits.
Ah.
So that's and they just came out with an update of that not too long ago this year. So they've got a 105 with a 1.4 aperture and VR. And it's got me salivating a little bit. I don't think I'm going to go get it right away.
Macro.
Yeah, it's another fun tool. One of the things we're going to do to help you out here is on the show notes for this, which again, you can find at williambeem.com/episode 55. We're going to put a link of some of the best selling DSLRs on Amazon right now.
Yeah.
And that way you can see what other people are looking at, what's really working. Look at the reviews on those. That'll kind of give you some idea of what people are expecting from the lens. or excuse me, not the lens, the camera. And if there are any problems, that'll show up as well too. So don't let one or two bad reviews on a product knock you away if all the good ones or the majority of the ones are good reviews.
Yes.
Because there's always going to be someone who's a little cranky in reviews.
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes it doesn't even have anything to do with the product itself.
Usually it doesn't. It's something like I've giving these hair straighteners a 1 star because I burnt my chin on them. I'm being absolutely serious. And yeah, people do that with reviewing things. Look, just check out the reviews.
But what we want to do is we want to put some of these links out here for you so you can go in, take a look at the reviews on Amazon, take a look at the feature set, and look at what's really popular today, because usually the cream rises to the top. Mm-hmm. And those may be the ones that you want to look at. I might try and do it in like different categories of, like good, better, and best, or maybe low-end DSLR, mid-range DSLR, and high-end DSLR, and maybe Nikon and Canon. Who knows? I'll put something out there. But I want to give you enough options that you can kind of look at it and start thinking about what is really right for the best DSLR for you. Thank you very much for listening to us on the Photo Flunky Show. We really appreciate you. Show notes are going to be available at williambeem.com/episode 55, and there is a transcript of the show there for free. And that transcript is going to have links just so you can subscribe to our show. It'll be available on iTunes, Google Play Music, Blueberry, Stitcher Radio, and maybe something else. If you go to photoflunky.com, you'll find them there on the player. And of course, we invite you to keep up with us and future blog posts by subscribing to our news digest. Every Sunday, we're sending out with a little message and links to a couple of shows, and just in case you miss them. You'll find little forms on williambeem.com to sign up. We really appreciate it. And hope you have a wonderful day. See you next week.